So I have a hard time saying no. But I'd have to run over to the clinical research course now because also have a hard time saying no. But thanks, everyone.
For those of you who this might be your first PALISI, those online, this is one of the reasons why PALISI exists. And you'll hear this a lot in the main meeting is, first of all, the proposal of ideas for projects. And I think it's really important that we as coordinators listen in to say, whoa, that is not feasible, or, ooh, I have an idea for how we could totally rock the study. So that's one of the things that we have done as a coordinator network is start to give input on these projects. The other thing that's really important, and these are good takeaways to take home to your sites, is some of the updates about the projects. What have we found? What are we excited about? Where are we going? And so that's kind of the whole point of us all coming together to hear about new ideas as well as hear presentations about what has been done and where we can go. So that's just kind of like a excitement teaser for the main meeting. And sometimes I feel like we think like, oh, this study, we might not be doing it at our site, or it might not be something we're interested in or we're interested in as a site, but all of these studies kind of piggyback on each other as part of the network. So I really challenge you all to keep listening in, even if it's not a study that you're doing, because one, you might be doing it, surprise, and two, next iterations might come from your own sites, institutions, and PIs. So it's good to listen up on what they're doing and why they're excited, and to start meeting those other coordinators to get better insight, tips, tricks, tools to become phenomenal coordinators in these different studies.
Woo, great. That selling message for coming to PALISI. Thank you, Lexi. Next up, Amanda is going to talk to us about shipping and transporting of infectious substances.
So fun.
Very important. Okay.
Good. Are we?
I lost the full screen.
Is this fine though? Does it?
I think so.
Okay. It's a nice view from up here. Hey everybody, I'm Amanda. I'm from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I'm going to talk a little bit about shipping and transport of infectious substances. I have done my fair share of shipping and transport, as I know we all have, mostly category B substances for me. So I've kind of seen the good, the bad, and the ugly over the years. But let it be known I'm not an expert in all areas, but I did consult our experts to put together this presentation. So, you know, if you have specific questions about shipping at your institution, I would definitely check in with your experts because it varies from place to place. But this is going to be just kind of a broad overview and best practices. So I'm going to talk about some definitions, classifications of infectious substances, the different regulatory agencies that we are in communication with, appropriate packing, best practices, documentation, and then briefly international shipping, because that also varies from not just institution to institution, but from country to country. So I hope that some of these terms look familiar to you as examples of some of the things that we tend to ship in clinical research. Today I'm going to focus on dangerous goods and infectious substances. So dangerous goods are items or substances that can pose a risk to our health, safety, property, or the environment. And infectious substances are substances known or reasonably expected to contain pathogens. Some other things that we might be shipping are biological products, cultures, and of course patient specimens. So there are many classes of dangerous goods. I'm going to go ahead and say that we don't always ship explosives or radioactive material. So I'm not crazy. So I think that for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to just focus on class 6 infectious substances and then class 9 dry ice. And class 9 is kind of a miscellaneous category. There's a lot of things in there, but dry ice is included, so I'm going to focus on that. Another thing that might be in class 9 would be like genetically modified organisms. Okay, so here are the regulatory agencies that put in place a lot of the guidelines pertaining to shipping and transport of infectious substances. Again, I hope these all look pretty familiar. First, the IATA is the International Air Transport Association, and it enforces the dangerous goods regulations. This is really important for all air, express, and international shipments, which they have to fully comply with the IATA regulations, and that's non-negotiable for dangerous goods. The next organization is DOT, which is the U.S. Department of Transportation, and that governs all the U.S.-based shipments, including both air and ground transport. So under DOT, the hazardous materials regulations come into play, and all shipments within the U.S. have to adhere to these rules. Additionally, the 49 CFR outlines the specific regulations governing the safe transport of hazardous materials. Moving on to the FAA, which is the Federal Aviation Administration. They are responsible for civil aviation safety. This agency conducts inspections and investigations into air transport operations, and they can issue fines for any violations to their regulations. Next, I'm sure we've all seen OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and they focus on workplace safety. So for clinical research, OSHA's bloodborne pathogen standard is outlined in the 29 CFR 1910.1030. And it's really important ensuring the protection of our workers in handling these substances. And then we have the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, that oversee the import and interstate of transit of certain agents and vectors. Under the 42 CFR, they regulate the safe handling and transport of these potentially dangerous materials just to prevent disease spread. And then finally, we have the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which oversees the import and interstate transit of animal pathogens and animal products. So I don't think that we're going to see most of this in our practices, but it's good to know. Okay, so there are three responsible parties when you're shipping. There's the shipper and the cosigner, the carrier operator, which would be FedEx or UPS, and then the recipient or the cosignee. So the shipper is legally responsible to maintain their current training every 2 years. They have to be knowledgeable about the shipment contents and be able to classify the regulatory definitions and use their professional judgment. They have to determine the mode of transport on which you're going to be shipping your substances, the selection of the appropriate packing. They have to mark and label the package in accordance with all of the regulations from the regulatory agencies I just went over. And they have to have accurate completion of all of the applicable shipping documentation, ensure permits are in place if that's applicable, and arrange with the carrier. We usually will use FedEx and UPS. These agencies can fine us for violations and impose additional restrictions. And then the recipient or the cosignee will identify and obtain the import of the permits if that's applicable. They'll make sure the package is all good on arrival and report any concerns back to the shipper or the cosigner. So after I just word vomited on you guys about that, I just wanted to review, just see if you're paying attention. So true or false, shipping training is required every 2 years for those that prepare and ship dangerous goods. Woo! Oh. Nice. And then again, true or false, the shipper is not legally responsible for classifying their shipment, marking, labeling, packaging, and accurately completing their shipping documentation. Woo! I love the participation. Okay, so let's take a closer look at some of the classifications. So dangerous goods are assigned UN numbers and proper shipping names according to their hazard classification and composition. The UN number is a 4-digit number preceded by UN and uniquely identifies the material. And then the proper shipping name is a standard technical name of the dangerous good, and it's as listed in the regulations. So here we'll go over Category A, infectious substances, Category B, exempt, human or animal, biological products, and accepted shipments. Improper naming or classifications can lead to injury, it could lead to accidents during transit, and possible fines or penalties, which nobody wants. Like I said, I'm not going to go over GMOs in this presentation, but for reference, the UN number for Class 9 dangerous goods GMOs is UN 3245, if you commit that to memory. Okay, so first we have exempt human or animal specimens. These are typically specimens that are taken directly from the patient and are considered to have minimal likelihood of containing pathogens. This classification is often used when the specimen does not pose a significant risk to health. And then next we have category A infectious substances, which I do also think is going to be pretty few and far between that we as clinical researchers are going to be shipping. These are pretty life-threatening pathogens. If exposure were to occur in a category A substance, it has to be capable of causing permanent disability, life-threatening or fatal diseases in otherwise healthy humans or animals. An example of this would be something like Ebola or monkeypox virus fall into this category. Additionally, certain pathogens such as anthrax, Hep B, tuberculosis, HIV are considered category A when they're cultured. I think a lot of these substances require higher level labs to store anyway. So we might not be shipping category A as often as we think. What we will be shipping a lot is category B substances. So category B are basically any substances that do not meet the criteria for category A. Examples of that would be something like staphylococcus, streptococcus, Epstein-Barr norovirus in patient specimens containing basically anything that was not going to be a category A. And then so basically understanding these are really help ensure that we follow our correct procedures and make sure that we're shipping our biological materials safely and in compliance with all the regulations. Oh, I didn't click that. So the UN numbers for category A for humans is UN 2814. For animals, it's UN 2900. And then for category B, it's UN 3373, followed by a sticker for that labels it as a biological substance category B. I'm going to go into marks and labeling a little bit later. Other shipment classifications include accepted. So these are materials that do not contain infectious substances or unlikely to cause disease in humans or animals. Examples of that could be purified DNA and RNA or proteins that are not considered hazardous. And additionally, non-pathogenic organisms like non-infectious E. coli fall under this category that pose no significant risk to health. Another example includes specimens containing pathogens that have been neutralized or inactivated, such as things that had been autoclaved or chemically fixed to a slides for lab work. Also included in this category are dried blood spots and blood tissues or organs for transplant. So this is interesting. If any of you do the AMPLE study that I run, we use those little Mitra tips that are technically dried blood spots, but because I'm also having you ship urine, that makes it category B. So otherwise, if you were just sending the dried blood spots, it would be considered an accepted shipment. But if you label things category B, I don't think they really call you for it anyway, but just a fun fact. And then next we have biological products, which include manufactured and packaged licensed products used to prevent, treat, or cure diseases or conditions in humans or animals. Examples of that are vaccines, therapeutic serums, and toxins or antitoxins. These are just products that are essential for medical research and public health, but they also require safe, careful handling to make sure that they're shipped safely in transit. So questions to consider when you're determining the classification is this considered category A or B by the IATA or DOT standards? Is it capable of transmitting disease? What is the medical history of the patient, of the specimen this is coming from? What symptoms does the patient have? Are there any local endemic conditions that may apply here? And does the pathogen, has it been inactivated? And usually we use eShip Global at CHOP, but whatever system you use will usually make you answer these questions beforehand, and then it'll classify it for you so you can ensure that you're shipping properly. I have another review question. So let's say that you're shipping a zoonotic pathogen to a university in Washington state. The pathogen is fatal to humans and there's no known cure. How would you classify this shipment? I heard A, the consensus. Yes. And specifically the UN 2814 because it is an animal pathogen. Okay, my next question is you're shipping an inactivated virus sample to a university hospital in New York. How would you classify this shipment? I heard accepted. Anyone else? Well, that was a great guess, and it is accepted. Awesome. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some dry ice, also known as solid carbon dioxide. So when dry ice sublimates, meaning it converts directly from a solid to a gaseous form, it doesn't pass through the liquid phase. So this makes it really useful for refrigeration for shipping temperatures. However, it can pose a significant risk and hazard if it's not handled properly. Dry ice can cause severe burns upon direct contact with the skin due to its extremely low temperature. Also, in confined spaces, it can displace oxygen, leading to asphyxiation. So make sure that you are in a properly ventilated space when you're handling dry ice. I made the mistake before, and I will admit this freely, that I was inventorying at times in a cold room to make sure that the sample stayed cool. And I was like, oh my God, why are we getting so dizzy in here? Because it turns out that room wasn't very well ventilated. So it was not a dire situation, but it's important to make sure that you're in a well ventilated room. So packing instructions when handling dry ice. When you're shipping dry ice, you need to use a foam cooler placed inside a tightly fitting cardboard box to provide insulation and containment. And like I said, it's important for this gas to escape. So as the dry ice sublimates, and that means that you should never seal the containers fully containing dry ice. Doing this could cause a buildup of pressure and lead to potential explosion of the container. And you also want to avoid placing dry ice in sealed plastic containers for the same reason. Lastly, the package must have a UN 1845 dry ice label. This label is mandatory for dry ice shipments and should include the net weight of the dry ice in kilograms, along with the name and address of both the shipper and the consignee. And this makes sure that the proper identification and handling is in place during transit. And this is another reason that the shipment might get rejected if those things aren't filled out. Okay, so some packing tips. There are specific instructions for each dangerous good, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail in a second. But category A and category B substances require triple packing, and there should be a leak-proof primary receptacle, a leak-proof secondary container, and then rigid outer packaging. So an example of a leak-proof primary receptacle would be like a test tube or a cryovial. The secondary would be a biohazard bag or a container canister, and then good outer packaging being that shipping foam cooler with the cardboard box. Okay, so category A and B substances. So for the primary receptacle, it has to be capable of withstanding pressure changes, especially when it's being shipped via the air. It has to be in a watertight container for liquids and sift-proof for solids, and they have to have a leak-proof seal. The secondary container also has to be watertight for liquids and sift-proof for solids. It has to be capable of withstanding pressure changes. A biohazard label is required, whether that be on the bag or the canister that it's in. And for liquids, it has to include enough absorbent material to hand a complete leak of the shipment if that were to happen. So we use often in Paradigm and Ample those absorbent sleeve things for the blood tubes and for urine that they each go in the separate slots. And that would be an example of a leak-proof shipment absorbent material. And then you also need an itemized list of the contents between the secondary container and the outer container. For the outer packaging, it's pretty similar, but for category A, you have to use a UN spec box that meets the performance requirements. It has to be purchased from the shipping vendor and display the approved UN labeling. It has to have cushioning or filler to protect the contents, and the smallest dimension can't be less than 100 millimeters. For category B, the outer box has to be strong, rigid, and good condition. It has to be able to pass a 1.2 meter drop test. And it also has to include cushioning or filler to protect contents. And at least one surface has to have a minimum dimension of 100 by 100 millimeters. We reuse these shipping boxes all the time in our work, which is great because shipping boxes are really freaking expensive. But definitely make sure it's not on this let's leg before you ship using a box, because things like that can have it get rejected and returned to sender, and we don't want our substances to be thawed out for using dry ice. So here are some of the max quantities for each of those receptacles for category A and category B. I won't read all these verbatim, but basically the inner receptacle for category A has to be no greater than 50 grams or 50 milliliters, 4 liters and 4 kilograms for solids and liquids for per package, and so on. Okay, so marks and labels. So all marks and labels have to be on the outside of the box. They have to appear on the same face of the box if the space allows. They can't touch, overlap, or wrap around the corners or the sides of the box. They have to be grouped by their hazard. If a label is in a diamond orientation, it has to appear in the diamond orientation, like the example of that one on the bottom right corner. Exempt stickers and labeling. So generally no specific stickers or labels are required for exempt shipments, as these are not considered dangerous goods. However, basic labeling like identification of the contents, like a sticker that says exempt human specimen or exempt animal specimen, might be required by the carrier or the regulatory body. Similarly with the accepted stickers and labeling, they often require some kind of labeling to indicate that they're accepted. For example, they might have a marking that says dangerous goods in accepted quantities, but there's no hazard label required. But certain transport markings are needed to make sure that we identify that the shipment is accepted. Okay, so category A, here is like a list of all the labels, the label requirements that you would need for category A. If you have a liquid in your package greater than 50 mils, you need the orientation arrows on opposite sides of the box. You need the proper UN number label, the name and the address of the shipper and the consignee, the dry ice label if you're using dry ice, and the infectious substance hazard label. And these are all listed here below. For category B, you'll need the UN 3373 label in the correct dimensions, as indicated there on the, oh, I did not know that was touchscreen. You need the biological substance category B label that has to be at least 6 millimeters. Again, the name and address of the shipper and the consignee. The name and the telephone number of the person responsible has to appear on the box or the waybill/label. And the orientation arrows on the opposite sides with packages that have greater than 50 mils of liquid. And then also the dry ice labels if you're using dry ice to ship. So documentation for all shipments need the waybills/the label, which is usually coming from the shipper. So for all shipments, this is required. It should include a tracking number. It can be manually or electronically generated. I know we all use eShip Global or US Campus Ship or UPS Campus Ship or a FedEx account. The shipper and the consignee information should be on the label, and it should include any handling information. For example, the dry ice weight should more or less match the weight indicated on the dry ice label. And failure to adhere to these guidelines can lead to some delays in shipments. The shipper's declaration. So the shipper's declaration is only applicable for category A substances. It has to be completed using approved software and has to include the following information listed here. the shipper, co-signee, person responsible for the shipment, the quantity of the dangerous good, emergency contacts, signature of the shipper. You have to have 2 signed copies sent with the shipment and 1 signed copy to be retained on the site for at least 2 years. And this has to be readily available in the event of an FAA inspection or investigation. Again, I don't think a lot of us are really shipping category A, but if you are, this is definitely very important. If you're using a website like eShip Global, like we do at CHOP, usually when you fill out all the criteria and it classifies it as category A, it will send you to a shipper's declaration, but otherwise you can find this using outside resources as well. Okay, so best practices, and this little graphic is courtesy of Josie for the dry ice sandwich, as we like to call it. But if the study that you're shipping for has a shipping checklist, use it. Don't reinvent the wheel. All of those things are outlined, and this is a lot of information, so you can always find it in certain places. But if the study that you're shipping for has it all laid out for you, use it. For dry ice, the sandwich rule is great. Fill a third of the box with dry ice, put your samples on top, and then another third of dry ice on top. If there's still room between the top of the box, then you can fill it with paper or things just to make sure that it's insulated well enough and that nothing is moving, the contents aren't moving in the shipment. Only ship on Monday, Tuesdays, or Wednesdays. All of these, especially if they have dry ice, are normally going to be overnight shipments, but I think we all know that we struggle with shipping delays here and there. And if you ship on a Thursday, you have the chance of running into the weekend, and that can be a whole hassle. Nobody wants to come in to have to receive a shipment and things like that. So it's just safer to always ship on a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Check the shipping box for labels and barcodes from previous shipments. If there is something on there from a previous shipment, it will get rejected and it will get sent back to you. It's really tough to get these stickers off the boxes when you want to reuse them too. My life hack is that if your office is so cold in the winter and you have a space heater, I will heat up the sticker and peel it off and it comes off really smoothly. That's my life hack. Otherwise, it makes the boxes last a little bit, not as long if you have to keep ripping it off. Look for dents and tears in the packaging. That's another way that the shipment might get rejected. Also, check the foam cooler as well, because if there's cracks in the foam cooler, then the condensation from the dry ice makes the whole thing really wet and it doesn't insulate the samples as well. So I know it's hard to throw away these boxes because they're so expensive, but if you really have to, you really have to, because it's just worth it to not have anything get rejected. And again, if you're shipping with dry ice, double check that there's room for the CO2 gas to escape. I usually only tape the box lengthwise. I don't tape around the corners and stuff like that, just to make sure that there's ways for the gas to escape. Okay, so imports and exports. This is a pretty brief, very high level overview. One, because I don't think we really internationally ship that often. And everything varies from place to place. So if you are exporting from the US, you'll need to fill out a commercial or pro forma invoice in addition to the waybill. And this will indicate the commodity, the value, and the purpose of the shipment. It will be different from country to country, and the destination country might require an import permit to clear customs. It's the co-signee's responsibility to determine if the permit is needed and to obtain it. And they can take days or weeks to obtain. So it's definitely something to plan for in advance if you have to do international shipping. And if a permit is required and you don't have it right away, the package is going to remain in customs until that is provided, which can be pretty detrimental to some of our samples if they have to sit there for a while. So importing into the US, imports into the US will most likely need a CDC permit, which you will need a SAMS account to obtain. Getting an account can sometimes take a while as well, as everything does. So once you have the permit, a copy of the permit has to be included inside the shipment. And otherwise there has to be it has to indicate if there's a pathogen that can cause disease. And if it doesn't cause disease, you have to include a certification that says that it doesn't. USDA permits are only really for animal origin products. So again, I don't think that's something we're really going to be doing. So I think the most important thing to take away from imports and exports from the US is that you need a CDC permit. I don't have a ton of information on something like this just because it does vary so heavily on country to country. So if you are shipping anything internationally, definitely check in with your local experts to make sure that you have everything that you need for that. And I think that actually brings me to the end. So I just wanted to put a little plug for our leadership team, and thanks to everybody for putting this education day together. It's been really great to see all your faces. And yeah, that's all I have. Thank you. If there are questions, I will try to answer them as best as I can, but a lot of things are inside the regulations of like the 49 CFR, the 9 CFR, and all of those things. Cool. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Amanda. This is CJ attending virtually.
Thanks, CJ.
Okay, guys. This brings us to our break. So we're going to take a 15-minute break and then we will reconvene. And Lexi and Shelby will go over onboarding new coordinators.